Hello, welcome to the Hard Folk Podcast. My name is Matt Gower. On today's show, I have Don Pyle with me. He has a new book out called Rough Description, Love Letters, and Ghost Stories from a Life in Music. But if you're like me, you probably know him as well as the drummer from the band Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet. So we had a really great talk. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. It's the summertime soon. I'll have my kids at home with me. So not a lot of opportunity to record podcasts. So this is kind of a season finale of sorts. I'll be back in the fall with more podcasts and more guests. But for now, I think this is a good spot to end off on for the summer. So thank you to everybody for listening. Don't forget about Friday Night Folk July the 10th, featuring last week's guest Elizabeth Royal, as well as Graven at the Art House Cafe, and enjoy my talk with Don. Don Pyle, welcome to the Hard Folk Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Now, you have written a book. This is this your third book now?
Third book.
Yes, Rough Description, Love Letters, and Ghost Stories from a Life in Music. And it kind of snuck up on me. I am probably similar to most of the fans that have been drawn to you in my age group, where I'm a huge Shadowy Men and Shadowy Planet from a Shadowy Planet fan. So that's kind of what directed me to this book. But I found it really interesting because right in the intro, you arranged Rough Description not so much chronologically, but as a set list. So what I want to know for you as a musician, as a performing musician, what are the elements of a solid set list in your mind?
Well, peaks and valleys for sure. Peaks and valleys, and having kind of like the lesser kind of appealing ones sprinkled out throughout the ones that are the stronger ones, and then ending with a bang.
Sure. Now with Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet, it sounds like you were riding the wave, kind of learning and growing as you grew more successful. How did that affect your worldview as both a musician and just as a person in general?
Um, it's so hard to separate that from kind of like what was already, I think, kind of like in each of us. When I say each of us, the three guys who are in Shadowy Men, where we were already at, because we kind of came of age. Like, those guys are just a few years older than me, but definitely punk rock was what informed a lot of our youth, and kind of the ideals of that, which are built on fairness, equality,
Mm-hmm.
gender equality, being open-minded, being open to anything, and experimentation, and also being pretty skeptical about the larger business thing that we enter into. So I think that those same things kind of like carried us through, and a lot of the way we operated and the way I've operated is sort of from a base of those principles, without even like really being conscious of it. It's just kind of like who you are. So uh, I think our life experience was a lot of just validating those things as being kind of like the correct path to be on. If something feels wrong, then be really wary of it, and back off when necessary, and do a lot of things on instinct and personal relationships. I think that is the
Mm-hmm.
thing that over the course of the band and anything I've done, like, I've really kind of valued the personal relationships I've had with different people in different situations, and those almost always are an indicator of how the experience is going to be. How, whether you're going to be treated fairly, whether you're going to enjoy working with this person, whether you trust them, all those things, they just kind of lock in together.
Yeah, and you say instinct. It was almost kind of like you were operating without a safety net for for the first part. Well, for most of your career, how did it feel? Just kind of going with the flow.
Well, it's great when it works, and then
Yeah.
it's really stressful when it doesn't work. It's something that I've like, kind of. I've been doing these readings around here and there, and I've
Mhm.
introed this chapter that I wrote about going to hair school about
Right.
uh, talking about the stress of being self-employed. How
Mhm.
no matter how long you do it, you're always looking at your bank account and measuring kind of like how much time you have before you have to get a real job, and that stress never ever goes away, no matter whether you have enough in your bank to pay for the next year for you to live doing that, or if you have nothing. So the I think that it works when it works, and then when it doesn't work, it's almost always purely financial. Like that you have made a record, put all your money into a CD that you've made that, you put out, and then nobody's interested in CDs, or no one's interested in this particular CD that you did. So it's all peaks and valleys, because people know Shadowy Men, and some other things I've done, but then there's all these other things I've done that no one ever mentions, and those are the ones that are kind of like the kind of a more of a challenge to your own sense of following your instincts. But sort of yes and sort of no, because creatively, any of the things that I pursued, I can't say there's anything that I regret doing. It's really just uh, financial, where it's like
Yeah.
I've put my time and money into doing this thing, and like, oh boy, no one's interested, so I'm potentially gonna have to get a real job.
Yeah, yeah. Now, speaking of real jobs, the hairdressing school chapter kind of caught me a bit by surprise, but I think it was one of my favorite chapters in the book. It almost like I was thinking like this would be a good almost like TV show or sitcom premise. Have you ever
I
thought about that?
agree. I agree. I've been thinking that might be my next project, is try to write a script for that. A few people have said that, and kind of when other people pointed that out to me, I kind of saw it the same way. And one of the things that I love about the way I've done things is I feel like I can do anything. Like whatever I kind of set my mind to, like writing a book. Like, even though it's my third book, it's the first one that is all writing. And I kind of feel that way about writing a script. Uh, um, I feel like I can do that, and I may do it. And putting that chapter in, I know that like when I started pursuing being a barber, doing that I know that people's ability to kind of sort of be expansive in their sort of understanding or acceptance of who any person or artist is pretty limited. And I knew that as soon as I started doing barbering, that a lot of the offers I was getting for doing music production or scoring and stuff would disappear.
Hmm.
And it totally happened that way. And I heard over and over and over from people like, "Oh, I guess you gave up music, huh?" And it's like, well, no, I'm still like I'm scoring a TV series while I'm doing this. I'm playing in two bands, and there's a disconnect, even though people know those things. That because you're doing a job after being self-employed for all of your life, that they have a hard time accepting that you're sort of multi-dimensional or something like that.
Yeah, and I think people kind of prefer to hold an illusion over professional musicians, where like I think the majority of music that you're listening to comes with people who have day jobs.
Absolutely. And I really wanted to kind of like be pretty direct about that. I don't want to like, pretend that, I'm just like getting by. But at the same time, going, pursuing being a barber and going to that hair school and every experience and everything, when I left the barber shop that I was working at, it was, even though like going to work at a barber shop and doing that thing was a fantastic experience, it was hugely like the social thing, which was something that I
Mm.
was really missing. And I connected with this like younger generation of people who I have so many new friends from doing that, and people who I sort of knew who were coming to get haircuts from me, I really loved the kind of like the talk show sort of format of them coming and sitting in my chair for a time and having a great little conversation with them.
Well,
Uh,
there's a podcast idea right there.
oh my God, absolutely! I thought about it when I started barbering because I would have so many interesting conversations with people, and
Hmm.
uh, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about one of them. You know that TV show Hudson and Rex?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
So it's a terrible Canadian show of a cop and his dog, and they go
Okay.
and solve crimes and stuff. And I somehow started seeing clips of this show, and then kept watching highlights of it on YouTube because it was just so ridiculous. It was such a dumb like show with the worst scripts. And then like after I went, well, while I was in this period of obsession with Hudson and Rex, this guy comes in with a sweatshirt for a haircut with the logo of the production company. And so I asked him, like, hey, do you work for that company? He's like, yeah, I'm the producer on Hudson and Rex. So it's like, okay, yes, like, here's our chat show.
Exactly. Now I want to go back to your punk roots because that also I love reading about just like the grassroots like starting up of people's adventures. And you grew up in Calgary, and but
Toronto. I
there's
grew up in Toronto.
yes, you grew up in Toronto, right? And with so many with so much geographical and kind of ideological space separating the country, do you feel like punk evolved in a different way in Canada?
Because I don't have the experience of kind of like say like the hippie or the folk movements that happened kind of before me.
Yeah.
I can't really say because to me it was new and different and created something different, but that's only because I was the age where I was coming into it and it was all new and different for me. So I kind of see like that bands like today I'm seeing all these news stories about David Clayton Thomas dying from blood, sweat, and tears. And so, like, I know that there was like a cross Canada thing in a different sort of bar situation, union bars and stuff like that that existed before I started playing in bands. But to me, where there definitely was a huge, huge kind of um, blossoming of things that situations that were more dictated by the artist, venues that were more welcoming to bands,
Hmm.
where you were being booked by people who were also fans of punk rock or whatever new music was happening. So there's, I think, a different kind of like, I feel like that's when a community network was developing and sort of established all across Canada. And I think that just like being under an umbrella of being like, punk or new wave or whatever connected you. You understood that like, oh my God, there's like, this band, in Montreal, the Normals. So like they look like they're, a kind of a punk band. So I'm interested in them. And then it's easy to connect with them, send a letter and
Hmm.
then all of a sudden you're doing a show together.
Yeah, yeah. And it did seem like a lot of the punk and indie bands operated outside of the box when it came to like performing, touring, and recording. Do you feel like in the 80s and the late 70s, were there more or less constraints on artists at that time?
Um, I think I don't know. I to me there's less
Hmm.
because people were kind of like establishing new systems. Like when I mentioned like union controlled bands, that was kind of like the end of the reign of musicians union controlling venues
Yeah.
and where people were kind of like doing what they wanted. So it was kind of creating a new not even infrastructure because I don't think people were so conscious about like creating an infrastructure. They were just doing things in a way that suited them and that in a lot of cases was out of necessity, that we have to open a club in a basement because no other bar is going to book us. But
Hmm.
then this club in the basement is so much better than any of those other situations because things are looser and we could do what we want. To me, that was like the most exciting thing about the beginning of punk rock, was that there are no parameters on this. Like, even when you look at what the first bands that are, considered to be punk bands coming out of the CBGB's scene, that they were all so different from each other, and they weren't that kind of like monolithic thing that contemporary punk is thought of now. If you hear about someone being a punk band in 2026, you have a pretty good idea, and it's kind of about conforming to the pre-existing structure of what punk music is.
It's funny that
Where
you say conforming.
Well, I mean, it totally is. Like, I think that there's a lot of conformity within the definitions,
Yeah.
that and there's something about that. There's something weird about the formality of that it really attracts people. Like, I think about hardcore, particularly contemporarily, that that it's such a fairly rigid structure of behavior with audiences and how the bands relate, and the ways that audiences move, and
Hmm.
getting on the stage and diving off, and the behaviors are so established, and people kind of like play out this sort of action over and over and over again in a way that I find fascinating. I know that it's like easy to kind of like look at that when you're looking at a video of it and feel like, boy, that's so like, these 100 videos that I watch all look exactly the same. But when you're in it and you're there, the volume, the excitement of people thrashing around, that's what that music is made for. It's made to be experienced live. It's kind of like the communal experience. So there's things about it that I understand, and things that I don't understand, and I also kind of like have a bit of a laugh as an older person about the kind of the idea of it being uh, about individuality, when I see so many elements of it being about conformity.
Sure, sure. And now in your book, you said that the album hurt more than it helped in the early days of punk. Can you expand on that a little bit? How did like the long form album hurt the punk scene?
I don't know if I said that exactly. I don't. Maybe I did, but I don't remember saying that.
Well, I
But
think I think I maybe took a part of the sentence out, but yeah, yeah.
well, I mean, definitely singles like were so. I think it really suited the medium of the movement for a while,
Hmm.
because you had someone like Susie and the Banshees, like their first album, or Magazine, like those are albums that should be albums. Joy Division, those should be albums. They're not singles.
Yep.
But for so many bands, I think that the very brief contained thing of one side, a second side, that putting all your best ideas into that small thing, I think it kind of like suited this thing that was very explosive. Everything's very like short, sharp,
Hmm. Hmm.
get in, do your thing, get out quickly, and have beautiful art to go along with it. That was another thing, is I feel like it was a really artful movement, and picture sleeves, were a huge, huge part of that. So I feel like it was, just like a little explosion in a, 7-inch single, that you, and also you put your best thing forward. So every time you make a single, you're putting your best songs. And that was totally what Shadowy Men did with all of our singles. It was like our best song, like went on to a single. What sounds most like a single? Because we grew up with an ideal of radio, with
Hmm.
a single sounding like you know a single. You're not going to put or we weren't going to put something that was kind of like more sort of experimental as like an A side of a single. It was like we were going for you know our what we thought of our best thing. And you know some of the singles, for sure, we did things on the B sides that were not single oriented, but they
Yep.
were also records in those cases that we gave away, that we weren't selling. The ones that we were giving away for free were the ones that we had total freedom with.
Right, and you guys did a lot with your album art, and like one of the things that you even hacked the singles almost like you were able to fit almost like EPs onto your singles from what it sounds like, and it was really cool. Like you said, you turned you turned singles into Jiffy Pop containers and
Yeah.
records into board games. Um, have you ever done anything in a conventional way?
Oh my God, we're a rock band. We're a three-piece rock band. It's like the most conventional thing you can imagine, you know?
Yeah, I suppose.
Uh, uh, so, sure. I mean, all those, as much as like, we were kind of like following our whims and doing what we wanted,
Hmm.
there's definitely kind of like a whole history behind us that we're piggybacking on,
Sure, sure.
and a record as product, that was something that was not necessarily a new idea, but we
Mhm.
did a lot of things like that, like making the Jiffy Pop record that were totally is like, this is a really dumb idea. We should do that. We did a lot of that. This is a dumb idea. Let's do that. And then
Sure.
you have these kooky experiences because of doing it. Like we drove out to Niagara Falls where the Jiffy Pop stuff and Fiddle Faddle, all that stuff was manufactured.
Oh.
We went to the warehouse to buy the stuff, and so we walk in there to pick up our Jiffy Pop, and so you walk into this manufacturing situation, and just like see how Jiffy Pop is made. So who else gets to see that? um, and and it was also sort of fed our bratty nature, because the first thing they said was like, you're not going to tamper with this in any way, are you? Like, you can't take the lids off and anything like that. We're like, no, of course not, no. And then of course it's the first thing we do when we get home.
Did you get any blowback from the Jiffy Pop people?
No, I mean, like, as if they even like know or care.
Yeah.
Well, we might have changed something, because we noticed that after that they made them just a little bit smaller, so you can't put a record in.
Ah.
So they went from being 7 inches to just over 7 inches to 6 inches. So we like to think we had something to do with that.
That's funny. Um, Now, I talk a lot about songwriting on this podcast. You mentioned that you were a three-piece instrumental band. I'm curious, what makes a good instrumental song?
Oh boy, I definitely do not have the right answer to that. Uh, I, yeah, I don't know. I don't think there really is an answer to that. The thing that for me about it being instrumental is how open-ended things are.
Mm,
So to me, that's like any song, but I feel like somehow instrumental bands have more kind of permission to be completely open-ended and pursue whatever your feeling is. I've played in bands. I play now in a band with vocalists, and there's something that I find very kind of like, I find it more limiting playing with singers.
mm,
I kind of like the sort of constant sort of either battle or just this feeling of like the whole band is a ball and you're just rolling along, and each of you takes sort of prominence at different time depending on the moment of the song. Whereas with a singer, it's kind of like, okay, now it's all about this subject, the singer, the words, where this one element becomes the entire focus for large parts of the song. And it's not the way that I grew up like playing. Most of my experience is playing instrumental music. So I often find the vocalist gets in the way of good songs. Um, so yeah, uh, just like so there's the best thing for an instrumental band. It's like, don't let the singer in.
Sure. Now you talked about in the book. You say my music and gay world were very separate. How did it feel being part of these communities, kind of in the punk world and in the gay scene that are kind of outside of the mainstream?
Um, well, I think that that's just kind of my nature, and well, to say outside of a mainstream, I think that that was what's horrible about, and still is about, gay scenes,
Sure.
particularly in music, because, it's like a community that is based on your sexual orientation, which means that you have, you know, basically the exact same cross section of people that you would have in the world in general. So I don't really feel like it is a non-mainstream scene. I feel like it's smaller because
Yeah.
it's only a percentage of the population, but at the same time, it's has the diversity slash normalness of the general population. I think that music scenes, particularly, if you're in some kind of like, so-called underground scene, or if you're doing something that's sort of more esoteric than what the mainstream thing is, I feel like that's where you're living in some kind of like subculture, and you're creating things in a way that is sort of more subculture. Whereas I feel like gay scenes are actually very mainstream and kind of boring for the most part.
Now you mentioned also this was really interesting to me, the kind of DIY ethic, which you're very much into, in the lesbian music scene as well. Do you feel like that was almost like a precursor to the rise of like outsider music and outsider folk, like people like Daniel Johnson's music?
It's very connected,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that's super exciting about that to me, that I sort of reevaluated retrospectively, was that I love that it was people who had ideas, because ultimately I feel like that is the core of everything that excites me, is like a good idea. It's like,
Mhm.
whether how well it's executed is measurable differently by different people. Like, if you're very poor at playing guitar, that doesn't mean that you're not a great guitar player, because lots of people who are, kind of beginners at that, make amazing sounds on guitars, or write, unusual emotional songs like Daniel Johnson, uh, or Jad Fair, who we worked with. It was also like very like a genuine eccentric person who is kind of operating on a different plane than a lot of people. Um, I forget what your question is, but
No, no, that's good. That's good. And that's kind of how I guess we like the outsider music is, I think, the first front line of defense against artificial intelligence, because like I was listening to Zoe Amba. She has an album called Eyes Full, and I was listening to that, and like there's so many elements of punk and jazz and all these things like that. And
yes,
you cannot recreate that with artificial intelligence.
yeah.
So that's definitely something that that is important for people to appreciate, is the imperfections, and just you don't have to be skilled to play music, but you have to be confident and just committed to what you're doing, committed to your vision.
Confident and have ideas,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that that was the thing where we were originally asking about the early women's music scene, where it was a movement that was uh, uh, very much driven by their outsiderness.
Hmm.
So it was like, we are banding together because the larger music scene, the larger music industry, is not either interested in us,
Hmm.
or that's not who we want to sing to. That's not who we want to direct our music to. So, it's great for us to kind of create our own situation here, just as the punks did, just as folk people did, just as like hippies did, just as metalheads do.
Hmm.
All these scenes, like, create it for yourself, and you'll and make it the ideal of what you want it to be, and it'll always be better.
Yeah. Now, does it feel like you cut your teeth playing on an entirely different planet compared to what the modern music industry looks like today?
Well, I don't know if it's so different, because one of the things that love about, all the various music things, is that it's operating on so many levels.
Yeah.
So there are bands that I meet and see, or, give me records all the time, who are doing things very similar to how we were doing them. So I kind of feel like the music industry at large is something that we, for the most part, ignored, and it was pretty mutual. The music industry at large was very happy to ignore us,
Hmm.
and that worked out just fine. And I think that there are so many people kind of like operating without either any care about the music business. I mean, everyone knows the music business is like the most corrupt. Well, maybe not government. Being in government is probably more corrupt these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
uh, or crypto, whatever. But at a larger level, you are in a business that has been refined by market research and computer algorithms and strategies and business strategies and all that stuff. So the separation between like the business plan for Beyonce and um, the Terrible Threes, a local Toronto band who just started a label and put out a record
Hmm.
and they put on shows. So those things are so separate, but they're they have a ghost of each other sort of contained within them.
Sure. Well, that's I think a good spot to end off on here. So the book is Rough Description: Love Letters and Ghost Stories from a Life of Music. I highly recommend checking it out. It's a great read from start to finish, and
Thank
yeah, I
you.
really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Don, for joining me.
Thank you. It was great to talk with you.
Thanks again to Don Pyle for joining me. Go check out Rough Description. It's a great read. Like I said, I highly recommend it. This summertime, we all have some time off, so maybe use some of that time to go see a local artist. We could always use the support. If you're looking for some summertime listens, download some local music, buy some local music from some of the artists that you know. It really does help us a lot, and it's good for us to know that someone's listening to music. It's that simple. I guess I'll be away for a month or so. I'll be at home with the kids for the summer. But in the meantime, you can go back and listen to all my old podcast episodes. They're all great episodes. And yeah, if you're looking for someone to support, how about Elizabeth Royal and Graven, July 10th at the Art House Cafe for Friday Night Folk. That's a great one to go see. So anyways, I'm signing off. Tell somebody about the podcast. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you